Arc 6, Chapter 12, Baptism of the Watchtower. In an instant, the throbbing and burning pains dissipated. Natsuki Subaru had returned. Honestly, someone ought to applaud him for not screaming at the sight in front of him. After a second return by death, and once again landing in the flower field swarming with witch beasts, Subaru clamped a hand over his mouth and genuinely thought so. The overwhelming scent of floral sweetness filled the air, and through it came the sound of Meili clicking her tongue. Standing in front of the dragon carriage, the courtesan bear had its eyes fixed on the rhythm of her lips and the quiet movement of her fingers. It was a powder keg, and everyone was holding their breath. This was the exact scene he just faced, twice, in fact. And now here he was again, dragged straight back into it.
Are you kidding me?
As the events that had transpired echoed throughout his brain, Subaru's thoughts started to whirl into high gear. His perception needed to shift fast. Just moments ago, he was in a tumultuous life-or-death scramble, chased down by a swarm of witch beasts. But that was then, and this was now. Focus. Focusing on what is in front of him. Right in front of him. What was about to occur? That soft chittering noise reached his ears, that kitten coaxing noise. It was an oddly soothing tone, calm and innocent. But the reality was anything but. The perfume of the floral scent only made it harder to think, clouding his decision-making at the worst possible moment. Was it the stench, the sweetness, the noise, the itch, the heat, or the pain? Each sensation clawed at him, loud, cloying, suffocating. But which one was the truth? Which should be focused on? The more he thought about it, the more it stressed his brain, but no concrete solutions came to mind. His brain could not keep up with the discrepancy between the current situation and the situation that he had been experiencing up until then. Subaru desperately tried to adapt to the present, before feeling a light push against his chest. Looking down, he saw Beatrice's small body leaning on his chest. She was tucked snugly against his chest and gently lifted the reins in one hand, showing him what she'd grabbed. Perhaps she had caught what he had dropped during his immediate shock after returning by death. The moment of his last death flashed through his mind, along with the memory of Beatrice's tearful face and trembling voice. Yeah, that's right. That's how it is. He was now on the third time dealing with this paralleled situation. He had died here twice before now. The first death was inexplicable, but the second, that one at least retained some vague sensation of the reasoning. Even so, the pain at the moment of death seemed distant. The slight sensation of his organs melting internally, his thoughts being boiled like stew simmering in a pot, that sensation.
No, that's not what matters right now. What matters is...
Just as Subaru's thoughts caught up to his second death, Meili successfully drew the attention of the courtesan bear. Following the clicking of her tongue and movement of her fingers, the witch beast slowly diverted its gaze from the dragon carriage and was guided to its right side. If the courtesan bear simply lumbered off in that direction, everything would be fine. But Subaru already knew it wouldn't. The beast was almost gone when the ground dragon standing directly in its path, Gyan, let out a heavy, ragged breath. The pressure of facing a witch beast from so up close, and the scent of flowers that continued its violent spread, two kinds of pressure tormented the calmness of the ground dragon, which would make that tense thread snap. If the ground dragon made a noise, the swarm of the agitated witch beasts would attack suddenly and simultaneously. If so, it would result in nothing but a repetition of the previous two deaths. However, except for Subaru, no one could notice Gyan's agitation. Even Julius, who held the reins, also had his attention diverted from the ground dragon, concentrating on the threat of the monsters before them. Therefore, Subaru was the only one who could do anything about it. But how was he supposed to do that? He couldn't speak, nor could he rush over and touch it. Even trying to call out to Julius would draw attention and risk setting everything off early. And more than that, there just wasn't time to decide. What could he do? Then, in the last seconds, Subaru closed his eyes. If nothing came to his mind at that moment, he would go full all or nothing and call upon Julius. He recalled the 2 previous deaths, the onslaught of the witch beasts, and the light of the Watchtower coming alive again inside his mind. At that moment of the second death, there was the fact that a crying Beatrice had clung onto him, pleading, "Leave me alone!" which drove a deep thorn into Subaru's chest. And then he realized,
Bayako, I love you.
He hugged her small body from the back and whispered those words in her ear. Beatrice was surprised at the sudden expression of love, but the hand over her mouth did not allow her to shout. Instead, Subaru extended his hand towards Gyan at a diagonal. The same hand which had gently caressed and wiped Beatrice's tears just before his death.
Invisible providence.
Though, as his mouth was too busy confessing his love with a whisper, the name of that technique was chanted only within his heart, unfortunately. Just then, in the center of Subaru's body, a different sensation from when the link with Beatrice drained his mana permeated from him, like something dark being summoned, arousing a silent cry. It was the unseen hand, something that didn't even exist in this world, loudly declaring its arrival, ready to fulfill the task in place of the slothful Natsuki Subaru who had summoned it. With Subaru's chest as its pivot point, the black hand that had been created slowly manifested itself in the world. Of course, its existence could not be seen by anyone except for Subaru. As he was embracing Beatrice, the unseen hand just went through her, and it seemed like it did not make any unintended contact. While admiring that fact, he could feel that something in him was being drained away each second. Whether it was his soul or sanity, Subaru did not know. However, he could not afford to take too much time to avoid reaching out to Julius. The black magic stretched to Gyan's neck, who seemed like it was about to roar at any moment. The palm slowly stroked its thick neck coated by bulky scales. The large ground dragon trembled from being touched by someone, but somehow, its instincts probably felt that there was no hostility in the touch of the palm. And so, the ground dragon's rough breath calmed down, its body relaxing.
Huh?
Then, also noticing Gyan's reaction, Julius pulled the reins and soothed the ground dragon in earnest. As expected from Julius, he skillfully handled the ground dragon, noticing its agitation, with what could have otherwise been devastating. Confirming that, Subaru immediately cut off the connection with the unseen hand. With the black palm deprived of freedom, it dissipated in an instant, fading away into the parched wind of the sand sea, as if nothing had happened. After dodging that bullet, Subaru took a long breath of relief. At the same time, there was a part of him, like a dark, swirling miasma chambered within his chest, that he longed to expel. Naturally, things would never be so simple. Absence, a consequence brought upon by using invisible providence, still rent his soul, leaving its indelible mark. Yet, as Subaru grappled with the suffocating loss that twisted at his very heart, he couldn't help but think. Invisible providence, the cost of using the unseen hand, the suffocating sensation and feeling of loss, had become noticeably easier to endure compared to before. The first time Subaru had used this power, invisible providence, was during his battle with Garfield at the sanctuary. In that moment, desperate to unleash some form of power, Subaru had been overwhelmed by the profound sense of loss that he nearly convinced himself that his very ego had been irrevocably severed. The disorientation and sense of intoxication had been so intense that his consciousness wavered. Such was the exact reason why Subaru had been warned about the nefarious corruption latent to using such powers. No, his authority, the reason of which was obvious through its utilization. For this reason, he had never seriously considered using this power casually. Unlike that madman's unseen hand, Subaru's invisible providence lacked the strength and precision to match it. At most, it was good for wiping away a fallen tear or patting someone on the head. The cost it extracted thereover was far too great for such lacking returns. And that was why, in many ways, Subaru had all but sealed the power away.
It's not like I've gotten used to it.
Shaken with a feeling of loss and disgust, Subaru felt more anxiety than relief. What Subaru believed was that it was always good to hold more cards in one's hands, but that did not mean that possessing multiple pairless jokers and Old Maid would do him any good. Of course, it would serve as a powerful hand in games other than Old Maid.
What have you been doing for a while now, I suppose?
Oh! What? What?
As Subaru let out a small shriek amidst his worries, a grumpy voice suddenly appeared. Upon opening his eyes to see what was happening, he found his eyes meeting with Beatrice's own, staring at him. And that Beatrice looked quite unusual.
Bearco! What happened to your hair and clothes?
It's the result of Subaru being glued to Betty's hair and clothes all the time, in fact. Why do I have to suffer such a humiliation, I suppose?
Huh? Me?
In front of Subaru, who was tilting his head cluelessly, a furious Beatrice was attempting to hide the anger in her voice. Her splendid drills were jumbled, and both the delicate dress and the white cloak to protect the dress from sandwind were arranged eccentrically and running at the forefront of fashion. It was a state-of-the-art pattern that no one had ever thought of.
The fact that you don't realize it is what's so infuriating, I suppose. I thought maybe you were just anxious, so I generously overlooked it. But you just kept getting carried more away, in fact. But how? Now, I suppose you don't even remember those ridiculous love words from earlier, I suppose.
No. I remember that. I really mean it when I say Aishtaru, Bearco.
To those candid words, a red-faced Beatrice completely covered her head with her cloak. He really wished to admire that unfamiliar, cute appearance, but right now he could not play with Beatrice. As a result of Subaru's unspeakable efforts, Gyan would not make a fuss and would attempt to resume the march of the dragon carriage by relying on Meilei's ability. However, as Subaru went through the gulf opened between the courtesan bears, he brought Patrichet close to the coachman's spot.
Julius, Meili, let's make a temporary retreat. Things are bad.
It was because of the two deaths that he proposed a rework in their strategy.
I'm super disappointed in you, Oni-san. Just a little bit dangerous and you're immediately turning tail and running.
How typical of you, Barasu. I thought maybe you'd improved a bit after becoming Emilia's knight, but in the end, your true nature cannot be changed. Always quick to finish, as usual.
There's no reason to wound my pride just because I'm insisting on safety!
After managing to turn back from the flower garden and returning to the meeting place which they had set up after breaking through sand time, Subaru was being stabbed with strict criticism for making the decision to withdraw. Meili, who had successfully tamed the courtesan bears and opened the way towards the tower, and then Ram, who had been struck by the window in the dragon carriage, prepared for any emergency situation. Subaru, who had stopped the march of the dragon carriage and requested a face-to-face meeting on the sand, was shrinking as he was cornered about stopping their progress based on just his own opinion.
I don't think Subaru's judgment was wrong. Even if we tried to go straight through the flower field like before, I think something like what happened earlier might just occur again. So, if that were the case, we might have not made it out as smoothly as we just did now.
Oni-san doubts my ability? You believe Oni-san more than me?
We've come this far. I believe in both of you. But my opinion is that I especially want to believe what Subaru says. Sorry.
Emilia-tan Maji Magami, who fought against Meili's childish rebuttals while putting her heart into it. As if in prayer, Subaru brought his hands together, and beside him, Beatrice fixed her disorderly clothes and hair.
So, what exactly do you plan to do, in fact? If the witch beast girl's blessing is unreliable, then trying to pass through this flower field is maybe too reckless, I suppose. If Bubby were here, maybe it would be a trifling matter to annihilate a group of witch beasts this size. But that matters not now, in fact.
If Puck were here, yeah. Should I just try my best or something?
I really want that to be used as a last resort. Also, even if we wipe out the courtesan bears here, I feel like other witch beasts will rush forward and it will become an infinite loop. What do you think, Meili?
Flo being directed towards her, wearing a pout on her face. Meili averted her face. The girl crouched down, putting her chin over her knees, displaying the attitude of a child.
What is it?
It's a question of whether the only ones near the flower meadow are just the courtesan bears. To put it bluntly, if the courtesan bears weren't around, it'd be a home for other witch beasts, right?
It might not exactly be wrong, but that's not totally right either.
Which is it?
That's true. Right on the money, Oni-san. But if so, what are you gonna do about it,
Knowing Subaru's point of view, Meili questioned him back. Receiving her dissatisfied look, Subaru frowned, and Julius shrugged his shoulders.
I understand Miss Meili's point. Subaru's concerns are valid, but even so, if we keep retreating at every unexpected turn, nothing shall be accomplished. If we were able to anticipate or prepare for each situation as they come, there would be no unforeseen circumstances.
Even so, just leaving it all in the hands of a divine protection and rushing in without thinking is a different thing. Or rather, I should say, that suggestion would be very out of character for you. That's more like Garfiel's role.
Naturally, I would never suggest such recklessness. We should decide what to do after a constructive discussion, whether we proceed or return, that is.
Just like before entering the flower meadow, Julius said this, raising his 2 fingers. As Subaru snorted at the gesture, everyone began thinking about the situation.
What about having Barasu act as a decoy while we break through and he's being devoured by the witch beasts?
United we stay!
Rom and the others would be saved, and we could also get rid of these pesky bugs from Rem. It's a brilliant idea.
I'll be devoured!
Still, I'll work really hard to fight for everyone and such.
Emilia-tan comes to such unexpectedly meat-headed conclusions at times like this.
Me, what? What's with that all of a sudden? This is so embarrassing.
Unusually for me, I'm not giving unconditional praise to Emilia-tan, alright?
Leave it to Miss Meili's divine protection, and we will advance through the flower garden until we can no more. Once we have reached the limit, we shall launch a preemptive attack and rush to the Watchtower. It is a powerful gamble.
I can't explain it, but it'll fail. I can't explain it, but I'm certain.
You speak in a way that seems to have absolute certainty behind it.
I don't know. It's hard to explain.
It's hard to reject the plan of assault without evoking the taboo of return by death. During the discussion, which could hardly count as a meeting of strategy due to the lack of progress, Subaru suddenly had a realization and played his hand. He had forgotten to properly even contemplate the reasoning behind his 2 previous deaths, prioritizing the shock of the first and then the reverse course throughout the meadow. The first death was too sudden, and the second was an inexplicable frenzy, so we couldn't pinpoint everything clearly. But one thing was certain. Both of Subaru's deaths were a direct result of that light.
The tower shines. Has anyone else seen it too?
The Watchtower.
The Watchtower shines?
At Subaru's question, everyone tilted their heads with surprised faces. Subaru groaned at the poor response and that no one saw it. It was somewhat natural. In honesty, Subaru had witnessed that light at more or less the same time of his death. If that light really possessed an intent to kill, then all those who laid their eyes upon it would not live to tell the tale. An attack that would materialize certain death. That was what he should regard it as.
Natsuki-kun, you saw the tower glowing?
Huh? I don't believe I'm wrong, but I think it might have shined.
When was that?
When I was in the flower meadow, I think.
He replied to Anastasia's inquiry in the form of another question. However, because the situation in the flower meadow meant that he could not speak out, it did not seem suspicious that he had kept quiet about the light at the tower. Since Subaru had seen the tower's light both times returned by death was activated, it was possible that the taboo would be considered as violated. For a second, he felt sorry that he was able to report the truth only in irregular bits.
If the tower lights up, does that mean the sage in the tower-san was watching us?
Not necessarily. It's nighttime, too. It wouldn't be strange to use a light. I see. If the sage has noticed us, it may be a good idea to let them know that we don't mean any harm.
Except, since Subaru's argument had been blurry and ambiguous, Emilia's thoughts went in a completely different direction. Of course, it was a journey to seek friendly contact. If the cause of the light was indeed the sage, it was only natural that such an opinion would arise. But to Subaru, who was aware that the light was anything but friendly, this would be the same as running towards a cliff.
Wait! Let's try to sort our information for now, and then let's decide whether or not to get in touch with the sage.
Sort out our information?
Yeah, organize, because, it's all there. That light is not necessarily a sign of life from the sage. It's more, there's a possibility of it being a dangerous thing, like a Tanshoto, isn't there?
Choto? Well, you saying that you think the light you saw wasn't from the sage, but sort of from an automatic defense mechanism or something?
Exactly!
While Emilia had a question mark hovering over her head because the unknown Western characters used, Anastasia, or rather Echidna, understood the true meaning of Subaru's words. Julius heard them and looked curious. The knight murmured
That's so.
that under his breath, and
I do not know whether the sage has been alive for hundreds of years, or if it is merely exaggeration. Is it possible that the sage has left behind his legacy, still working as a device to protect the world?
Oh, I didn't think about it like that, but it is possible.
If that is the case, it would assume for convenience that everyone approaching is one who schemes to resurrect the Witch of Envy, even the kingdom's envoys. It's been a long-standing mystery as to why the sage, who was supposed to be friendly towards the kingdom, would display such violent conduct as told in reports.
relieved, Julius spoke, spurring Subaru's admiration with a, "So there's also this way of thinking." Indeed, the idea of a defense system left behind by a grand figure from the past, one that continues to expel intruders long since its master passed away, is a fairly common trope. Such in this magical world where such devices were possible, it wouldn't be surprising for such obstacles to be set.
If that's the case, I want you to give me a break because it means this trip will be a waste.
It doesn't matter if the sage is dead or alive, so long as there are records left by them. Don't go acting like the world's doomed already, Barasu.
I'm not gonna let Niiiiiiiick's bullying get to my head.
If Julius's speculations were correct, the whole foundation of the journey would be undermined. But even against such a possibility, Rom's determination would not waver nor change, as one would expect.
Anyway, staying awake for hundreds of years, always on watch, seems sorta like an implausibility. But if that's the case, there's still hope. As for already mourning the sage Shala, alive or dead, I don't think there's much reason to be pessimistic about it. You hear? Really? Why? If they're a long-lived species, it ain't surprising that they could be alive, you know? Even my Echidna. Her birth was hundreds of years ago, after all.
Pulling out the white scarf from inside her robe, Anastasia smiled. In response to that, Emilia stared absent-mindedly and immediately touched her pendant, thinking of Puck.
What? My Puck is also long-lived too, you know? No way he's younger than that Echidna. Nuh-uh.
Why are you competing with each other, Emilia-tan? Well, my Bearco is actually quite a lolly granny too, right?
Do you think Betty would answer that with a laugh, I suppose? It makes my skin crawl, in fact.
As Beatrice sneered with anger, Subaru shrugged. With the conversation having diverted from the main subject, Rom clapped her hands.
Age's life or death is beyond our realm. What matters now is the true nature of the light that Barasu glimpsed. Is it something dangerous or another one of his hallucinations? Let's come to a conclusion.
It's about time our relationship develops to the point where you don't doubt whether what I report is true or false, you know?
The fact that I'm not outright deciding it's a lie should show you I'm making some concessions here.
If they did not reach a consensus, it was likely that there would not be any progress. In any case, the discussion ended up returning to the subject of the true identity of the light.
I think it's dangerous. At the very least, it's not friendly.
And the basis is just intuition.
Well, that's right.
Right. That's troublesome.
The light of the Watchtower. Super was convinced that it was the cause of both of his deaths, but to convey that fact was a difficult task. So he thought it would be impossible to use intuition as his reason. But surprisingly, Rom took that reply seriously. And not only Rom, but Emilia and Julius too.
Just based on my intuition? You don't have any more doubts about it?
If this were just Subaru's initial hunch, I might think, maybe not. But it's Subaru's intuition, right? In that case, rather than doubting it right away, it's worth taking the time to think this more thoroughly.
Do not be so self-deprecating. You've been through your own fair share of rough situations, have you not? There's a certain intuition one acquires through undergoing such things. It could be called an appeal to experience, but whatever it is shan't be taken lightly. Like a field mouse that moves to its nest before the heavy rain, one should never underestimate Barasu's good timing.
It's just stupid enough? Huh? Is that what you're saying?
Like a reflex reaction to the poisonous remarks thrown his way, Subaru's shoulders relaxed a tad. Not being able to reveal the source of his information, even to those close to him, was an absurd reality. Subaru had come across the same situation many times, but each time he was saved by the concern and trust of the others around, in the same way, over and over again. Rem in the royal capital, Otto and Rom in Sanctuary, Emilia and Beatrice in the city of Pristella. They all believed in Subaru, in what he was.
There's no way to catch their attention in a friendly way. If you even make a loud voice, Bear-san will come to welcome us before the sage does.
That is something I wish to avoid. Then, the realistic means should be sending Emilia-sama's magic. Or so it seems.
Towards the Watchtower, Julius stretched his right hand and closed one of his eyes. It was a gesture akin to a painter attempting to get a sense of distance, then staying like that, silently thinking for a moment.
Roughly, from here to the Watchtower is around 10 kilometers. It is not a realistic range for Emilia-sama's magic, if produced from the front of the flower garden.
By the way, how far can you cast your magic, Emilia-tan?
Distance? I've never really measured it, so I don't know. But I don't think I can reach the tower from here. It'd probably evaporate before it hits.
The silhouette of the Watchtower at their current location was clearly closer than the silhouette visible before the sand time. In fact, on their trip through the field of flowers, they had come very close. Even so, the plan to aim at the tower from the edge of the flower garden was not practical.
If passage were granted by simply informing them of one's existence, Reinhard would have been able to get through. Being that guy, couldn't he just slash a slash that could cover a distance of about 10 kilometers?
There is no way of knowing that except asking him, but it is likely that Reinhardt did not get through sand time when challenging this trial. We've only reached this far because of Anastasia-sama. No, because Echidna knew the way.
You got a point there. Ah, shit! Don't you know anything more?
The proposal was rejected. Subaru pointed to Echidna with a melancholic voice. Then, playing her part as Anastasia, Echidna appeared skillfully handling the muffler concealing her state.
Even if you say so, it's hardly my fault. Simply being able to declare that a path beyond the sand time is an achievement no one has ever reached before. Perhaps you should be praising me a little more. Do you not think so?
We're the first to get here, is that it? Claiming to have the way there in memory, but you're actually a newspaper man on delivery duty with only a faint recollection. You're not doing your job.
There's some truth in that.
Subaru's theory being rude, Echidna did not attempt to refute it. The scarf kept silent, and that pondering attitude also passed on to Anastasia. Then, suddenly raising her face, Anastasia said,
That's right. But now looks like to be a better sum of things that we know at the moment.
The things we know. So...
That suspicious light from the tower. That's Natsuki-kun peeped. The witch beast filled meadow spreading in front of the tower. And then 3 sand times. Got anything else?
The information that Anastasia listed had all been established so far. It was important to build a path and pave the way to a conclusion. Subaru folded his arms and recalled the journey thus far and the dangers he had witnessed. For a while.
Now, there is this place we came to after choosing to cross the sand time of the night. Then there's the fact that it'd be too much of a burden on the ground dragons to pass through that flower meadow. Also, I'm pretty sure Meili brought a witch beast alongside us without telling anyone.
Counting on his fingers, and Meili's shoulders hitched in a panic. Everyone's eyes turned to the little girl, having seen her blatant reaction. In response, Meili hurriedly shook her head and...
Wait! Yes, Oni-san is right, but how does Oni-san know that?
Guesswork. It was just a trick question.
Still, it seems Subaru's imagination was right. What will you do?
Julius, in a quiet voice, questioned what should be done regarding Meili's betrayal. Hearing that attitude, Meili's face turned pale, but Subaru did not wish to make matters worse. Stopping Julius with his hand and fixing his eyes on Meili.
Don't worry, I'm not talking about scolding her. I understand it's just your insurance. Still, it was just a suspicious factor.
What? Should I let it go? If I do, you won't get mad, right?
There's no need to release it. If you think you need one, please, keep it. If we're being surrounded or chased by a group of courtesan bears, it'd be a great help.
Thinking he must be joking, Meili widened her eyes and just nodded. Just to be sure, Subaru stared back at Julius, who had yet to loosen his vigilant eyes.
That's what children do. Let's give her a pass.
If she were a child that was only capable of accomplishing what a child could, I would do my best to handle her that way. However, that ability is too great to simply trust her blindly, especially in a land like Agoria, which could be considered a garden for these witch beasts.
Even so, we're all sharing the same dragon carriage, so please get along.
And of Subaru's, Julius hesitated a bit and then ceased reaching for his sword. Then, instead of the silent Julius, Emilia raised her hand.
So, Subaru, let's continue the talk from earlier.
Oh, yes, let's move on.
If we can't get through the meadow, then what would we do? Maybe we could try using another sand time and see if we end up somewhere different?
That's one way, but there's something I'd like to try briefly.
Something you'd like to try?
Having no clue as to what Subaru was thinking, Emilia tilted her head in confusion. Copying that from Emilia, Subaru turned his eyes toward the edge of the flower meadow, the sea of flowers that filled the area up to the Watchtower. Of course, it was not possible to see to its end.
If the flower meadow comes to an end somewhere, we won't have to worry about being targeted from all sides at least. It's worth a try checking whether there's an edge like that or not, right?
In the end, everyone agreed to head to the edge of the flower field together.
If we act separately and get off track, it'll all be for nothing. That said, I'm not particularly keen on pushing forward through the Witch Beast territory without Miss Meili's aid.
That reasoning earned a unanimous nod from the group. Subaru agreed as well. As tempting as it was to scout ahead solo, safety came first.
Well, I'd like to start departing soon, but
With that, everyone finished prepping and mounted their respective ground dragons and the carriage. They would be heading left, keeping the silhouette of the Watchtower off to their right. That meant they'd be traveling roughly north, assuming the cardinal direction still made any sense out here in the dunes.
thinking calmly about it, this whole place is also a strange case of space-time distortion. If by going through sand time you arrive here, it's somewhat similar to door crossing.
It's not like Betty doesn't get what you're trying to say, in fact. Twisting space and manipulating distances. That does sound like a dressed up version of door crossing, I suppose. Betty's even pulled a similar trick on you once before, in fact.
You did? To me? When?
I'll never forget it. It was on our first encounter, I suppose.
First encounter? Oh! In Roswell's mansion! When I sheer get to that infinite loop corridor in one try! Oh, I'm sorry about that. Even though it was so hard for you to get it ready, I'm sorry for trampling all over your hard work. Sorry.
You apologizing all serious like it makes me seriously mad, I suppose. Like I just forget that easily, in fact.
You reminded me?
That's it, in fact.
Beatrice, riding with Subaru, suddenly flew into a pout. Subaru just sighed and gave her a hug to calm her down, the eternal puzzle of girl logic weighing on his face. Once she settled, he had Patricia approach the carriage.
Are you ready there?
Without a problem. Now all we need is for Emilia-sama to perform her task.
That's right.
Julius, sitting up front at the driver's seat, gave a nod. Subaru looked up toward the roof. Same as before, Emilia was stationed up top for the march. She looked unusually pleased to be standing up there, like it was a personal victory. Subaru raised a hand to her and asked, just like before, for her to put up the marker.
Emilia-tan, please, here. For the time being, this is our base camp. Be as quiet as possible. Like, so you don't disturb the witch beasts.
I gotcha. If we end up waking the witch beast now, it'd ruin all the effort we took to sneak away quietly. So nice and quiet. Super quiet.
Slowly moved his hand, gesturing to go slowly, and Emilia mimicked it while, before their eyes, a tower of ice emerged from the sand. It seemed like they were right in their judgment that it would proceed quietly. In fact, the ice tower was built slowly and gently, so the usual tense sound in the air went unheard. A few parts had come out looking a bit weak, but it had a fine finish, and seemed to be able to fulfill its role safely.
Is it okay?
Yes, no problems! As expected, Emilia-tan!
Giving the anxious Emilia a big O and K,
Okay!
Subaru peeked in the direction of the flower beds. There were concerns regarding the witch beasts, namely if they would be able to sense mana activity. But fortunately, there was no sign of anything other than the sweet scent of nectar flowing from the flower gardens. Actually, it seemed quite dull.
Even now, I wonder why are they pretending to be a flower meadow? If they want to camouflage themselves, don't you think a desert is a strange place to do it?
Really shouldn't expect that kind of cleverness from witch beasts, I suppose. Those things don't do anything outside of what's carved into their instincts. They just don't, in fact. That's just the kind of creatures they are, I suppose.
I see. Very interesting.
Beatrice, held near his bosom, gave a bitter evaluation. Nodding at those words, Subaru averted his gaze to the flower garden and aimed to give the order to their departure. And he noticed. At the edge of his field of vision that contained the flower garden, a change took place. Somewhere different from the flower garden. The watchtower glowed.
Emilia!
Huh?
Immediately, Subaru raised his voice and called out to Emilia on the roof. Hearing the urgency in his voice, Emilia stiffened. But the effect of the light exceeded that. Making a violent, sharp sound, the ice tower took a direct hit from something and smashed it to pieces. The large, slender ice tower, its height 10 meters, was nothing but fragile. However, as if destroying a sandcastle, the attack broke the ice with ease and reduced it to mana. Again, he had not been able to see it, but he understood.
I knew that light was an attack!
Oh, next one is coming!
While his body was bathed by fragments of shattered ice, Subaru turned his neck to Beatrice's call. Immediately after that, the Watchtower shone again, as per his intuition. The light's next blow was aimed at Subaru. The light would approach at a speed that did not even allow them to blink, and it would target his vital points with its single blow. Its devastating power was already known to Subaru, who had died from it already. Therefore, the moment his brain detected that had been targeted by the light, death had already been determined. The light attacked, aiming straight for Subaru's forehead. It was death itself, killing its prey without a sound, only leaving behind a skewing wind. Natsuki Subaru was once again about to be killed in cold blood, with no assistance possible.
E-M-M!
I suppose.
In this case, Natsuki Subaru was not the only one being aimed at. A pleasant sound echoed, and the attack that should have hit Subaru missed. The cause was simple. Subaru's strength surpassed that of the attack. EMM was one of the 3 original spells Subaru had developed with Beatrice. This particular one was absolute defense magic. During the activation of EMM, Subaru would not receive any interference from the outside world, being rendered unable to move. It was the result of applying all of Beatrice's yin magic skill and knowledge into manipulating time and space in a limited area around Subaru.
Oh, it's a bit weird realizing that the effect is similar to that asshole's. Ah!
The Sin Archbishop of Greed, Regulus, could stop the effect of time on his body by transferring his heart. EMM could be said to be a downsized version of that ability. However, there were no harmful side effects like one's heart stopping. The person would become invincible as long as their mana was not exhausted. In this situation, though, it was nothing more than buying some time.
But, just buying time! I've got important things to do!
Hey, Subaru, what are you screaming for, in fact? Are you okay, I suppose?
Behind Subaru, Beatrice's worried voice yelled as she used his body as a shield. It was like this because even though they were protected, sound and shock were still being transmitted. After EMM activated, the light of the Watchtower seemed to wonder why Subaru was not dying even after being hit again and again. So it kept bombarding him with consecutive attacks. Its rate of fire and the accuracy of its aim were both extraordinary, although the pain and the force of the blow was one that Subaru's body did not suffer. Unfortunately, it was human reflex to react with a yell upon being hit by something.
Subaru! Jeez!
Watching Subaru being showered by a concentrated attack, Emilia attempted to support him from atop the roof, looking to protect Subaru from the Watchtower's attack. A thick and enormous ice barrier was erected from the sandy ground. Perhaps the toughest defensive wall Emilia could create in an instant. It was well-intentioned, a shield from the attacks targeted at Subaru, but...
No way!
Even the ice walls do not stand a chance.
Emilia let out a shriek, and Julius a startled cry. As they could see, the ice wall was crushed in one shot. That unbelievable power was not the only reason. The ice wall was struck, but somehow weakened the light enough to avoid having it hit Subaru. Much of it rebounded and struck the sand, which kicked up a white smoke. Looking at it closely, the marks of the destruction of Emilia's ice wall showed that it had been melted rather than pierced.
Heat? The heat melted it all away?
Something fell to the ground. A needle?
Looking at the effects of the attack, Emilia and Julius simultaneously reached different conclusions. In the meantime, the assault resumed. Subaru was struck by a staggering number of attacks, and even though he was in an invincible state, it was exceeding their limit.
Subaru! suppose.
I'm listening, but I can't.
If things keep going the way they are, we'll be running out of mana very soon, I suppose.
Already?
We're barely hanging on by a thread, I suppose.
At Beatrice's cry, Subaru bit his molars while still under fire. Of course, what Beatrice meant to say was not,
Since mana's running out, you should supply more, I suppose.
but
Since mana's running out, we should counterattack, I suppose.
Can you do it?
What a foolish question, I suppose.
Beatrice did not answer his question by saying she could not. Hearing the response of his trusted partner, Subaru loosened his jaw, relieving his molars, and steeled himself.
The third one's incomplete. Let's go with the second one!
I'm going to deactivate EMM right after it hits.
There was no time. Subaru looked at Emilia. Emilia looked at him and nodded. There was no time to discuss concrete measures. But he believed it was conveyed. A flash of light shot out, and once again, Subaru took a direct hit. It didn't harm him, not while EMM was still active. But right then, the spell deactivated. His original spell was a one-time trump card, usable only once per day. Now that EMM was gone, Subaru no longer had any defense against that light. And before the next shot landed, he had to strike back.
The light.
As if it had predicted his next move, the next beam fired faster than any before. This wasn't like the previous shots. The speed, the power, this one was clearly meant to kill him. With Subaru's paper-thin durability, even one direct hit would be the end. And so...
Stop!
A surge of mana swirled in front of Subaru, and in an instant, multiple walls of ice erupted from the sand. This time, the defense was not limited to only one wall. Instead, 6 sheets of ice walls had been conjured at once. The beam of light slammed straight into the first wall. It shattered it easily. The second went down just as fast. The third barely even slowed it. However, there was a slight resistance on the 4th sheet, and the 5th one could endure for only a bit. By the 6th and last one, the speed of light was clearly dulled, but could still go through it. The light pierced through the final wall and lunged straight for Subaru's unguarded forehead. At that moment, a knight's blade carved a clean arc through the air and slashed the slowed beam in two before it could land.
Unfortunately, there would be a number of women who would grieve if he is hurt.
Rushing from the dragon carriage to this place and striking the light with a slash of his sword without minding the danger was Julius. Emilia's defense had weakened it, and Julius had stopped it. Even though he was slightly jealous of that combined strike, Subaru's preparation was complete.
Let's go! The second! Absolute invalidation magic! EMT!
Subaru threw back the hood he'd been wearing to shield himself from the sand and opened his mouth wide to begin the chant. In response, Beatrice, tucked behind his back, reached into him and pulled mana from deep within. Blending Subaru's magic with her own, she shaped it into a new spell. In the next instant, a soft light expanded outward from the two of them, forming a spherical field of energy about 10 meters across, wide enough to encompass the entire dragon carriage. To the naked eye, it looked like a transparent orb of light surrounding them, but its effect was anything but subtle.
Is this?
Even as Julius stared in surprise, another shot of light fired from the Watchtower. Catching it in the corner of his eye, he instinctively raised his sword. Then his eyes widened. The light flew straight for Subaru, piercing directly into the field, and then lost all momentum the moment it crossed the boundary. What had been moving faster than a bullet was suddenly harmless, reduced to a strange white projectile that barely held shape. With a flick of his sword, Julius knocked it aside, and it scattered across the sand.
A needle?
Something like that. No, more than that. Subaru, this magic...
Whoa! Look, I've got a million things I could explain, but we need to move! Get on the damn carriage! We're pulling out now! This thing doesn't last long!
Understood. Let's hurry.
Julius, recognizing the urgency in Subaru's voice, pushed aside his doubts and leapt onto the dragon carriage. Grabbing the reins without hesitation, he turned the carriage's head back towards the swirling sands of sand time. Charging the tower now would be suicide. They had to believe this was the right call.
Let's go! Don't get too far from me! Stay within the light!
Subaru! Wow! Even though there's so many lights being fired!
Clinging to the roof of the speeding carriage, Emilia stared at Subaru in awe. Apparently, even though the enemy's attacks weren't working, they were still firing at him non-stop. But no matter how many times those beams came, the moment they entered EMT's field, they lost all their power, falling harmlessly to the sand, neutralized completely.
At any rate, it is a terrific power. Is this your and Beatrice-sama's trump card of some sort?
One of the trump cards! I'm not gonna spoil it. But for now, our priority should probably be getting away from the Watchtower. No! Definitely!
I believe it's an application of yin magic, invalidating the effects of mana within range. If that's the case, it's a natural enemy of mages. No, you are a formidable opponent for anyone who uses mana to aid their skills.
I would say, it only seems to give a relative advantage. It doesn't make me stronger. I'll still lose in a fair fight against a strong guy. This is the ability that I developed thinking of when I will give a Rodchi a black eye.
Julius' admiration seemed completely genuine, and Subaru couldn't help but feel a little pleased with himself. Of course, some of that was just the relief of having dodged the tower's attack. But whatever the reason, it was still complacency. And really, by this point, the consequences of that complacency were already inevitable. Even Subaru couldn't have seen it coming.
Subaru, are we going back to the dunes in front of the flower meadow like this?
For just a short time, but yeah! We need to polish and refine our countermeasures anyhow!
He was mid-sentence, racing back towards a swirling sandstorm of sand time. The moment EMT's field brushed against it, the world tore open.
Huh?
Oh no, I suppose!
Beatrice jolted upright, shaken from the relief she'd only just begun to let herself feel. Her eyes locked on the view ahead, on the sand dunes splitting open beneath the night sky, and her voice trembled.
The distortion of space is invalidated by EMT. In fact,
Huh?
it's like you said, I suppose. The distortion here is similar to Betty's door crossing in that house. In other words, the distorted space will return to its original state.
What does that mean?
He didn't finish the question. All he felt was Beatrice clinging to him tightly. And then, just like that, the world split open, torn like paper, and began to unravel. Subaru, Patrice, and Beatrice were swallowed by the rift. So were Emilia, Julius, and the dragon carriage.
Not good. Emilia!
Subaru!
They were flung into darkness. Gravity itself seemed to disappear. Subaru couldn't tell which way was up, or where the dragon carriage had gone. All he could hear was Emilia's voice growing distant, in response to his scream.
This is...
But before he could even say bad, he was already gone, hurled out the other side of the ruptured sky. The boundary between the flower field and the sand sea was crumpled and broken, and a small group was swallowed into the rupture. From far away, a figure watched and stirred within the tower. It stepped away from the window where it had been lingering, its feet pressing against the stone floor as it descended the spiral staircase. Slowly at first, but each step came faster, more urgent, more eager.
Found you.
The voice was hoarse, like it hadn't spoken a word in years. But the joy in its tone, that was unmistakable.
Found you!
Of that, there was no doubt.